Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Heavy Repping. My name is John Tron Davidson, and I'm here once again in our super best fancy top test location in the southwest of England. So today is a very special episode of Heavy Repping because it marks the very first Maker's Dozen ever to take place in video form here on YouTube, and also for those of you listening on Spotify and elsewhere, yes, Heavy Repping is now a podcast. So that means if you want to listen to Heavy Repping on the go, you can do so, and you don't even get to look at this face. So today I'm going to be having a chat with Paul Holcomb, who is the head honcho of Bog Street Picks. Been mentioned in Guitar World a couple of times now, and indeed they have a new range of picks out called the Axe series. So we sat down for a good healthy chat about the company's origins, where it is now, where it's going, what's new about the Axe series, and so on. So without further ado, let's crack on. Thank you very much for coming back on after a technological hiccup last time, Paul. I do appreciate it. So, for those who are unaware, can you introduce yourself and Bog Street?
Sure. I'm Paul Holcomb, founder, chief experience officer, I like to say, Bog Street. Bog Street, I like to say our mission is pretty simple. Our goal is to enhance the guitar playing experience. So that's a fairly wide potential group of products and ways to do that. But right now we're sort of hyper-focused on the thing that we believe connects the player to the instrument in the most common way, and that's the pick. And then we've been around just over a year. The company got its start from a Kickstarter campaign launch that I think you were one of the supporters on that. I appreciate that. But that definitely sort of got the company sort of founded, if you will. At the time, it was really the result. The company was formed out of me trying to solve a problem of my own. Of just being able to get a handle on guitar picks, and I found it frustrating. And 3 years ago or so, I decided to get serious about learning the guitar, and I was so frustrated with it. As I searched for products in the market that tried to address that problem, I found that they were either gimmicky or just not as effective as they could be. So I started tinkering around. I've got a bit of a design background, and so I was able to use that to kind of create the first product, and then launch the Kickstarter. And we've been retooling and learning and pivoting in strategy ever since. So.
Wicked. So speaking of your background, what was your background before coming into making picks?
I guess I've always had kind of an entrepreneurial, spirit, if you will. So there's been lots of pivots and attempts in the past to do different things. I started in graphic design. I was in the Air Force for 9 years. I was a graphic designer in the Air Force. Dovetailed that design experience into the digital world in the late 90s. Early 2000s, and essentially steered my career into a discipline called user experience. So in the software world, user experience really has to do with understanding the end user, the customer, the user of a product or a service, and through in-depth understanding and empathy, ultimate empathy, to be able to walk a mile in that customer's shoes, creating a strategy for delivering a usable product that delights and solves specific problems. So I kind of married this company is kind of a marriage of a design background and the methodologies I learned in the user experience to basically understand the problem, frame the problem, and create a hypothesis in the form of prototypes and whatnot, and take that through a learning cycle and an iterative sort of process where you try to reduce the risk of building the wrong product and increase empathy and understanding of the user. So anyways, that's kind of a snapshot of my professional background.
Now, I'm going to talk about your. We've spoken a lot about design in this instance, and I'd like to talk a little bit about your original design, which is the Leap. Now, the Leap was an injection molded pick, and we're going to come on to that sort of stuff in a bit. But I know you got featured in Guitar World, which I'm going to come back to at a later date. But once you'd put that product out in the world, what was the feedback that you got from players in general?
So I actually brought some visual aids today.
Nice.
I brought some samples from the past that you're not going to believe. So my first prototype, I brought my very first 3D printed prototype of the Leap series.
Oh, cool.
And try not to laugh at how huge it is, okay? But that is the first prototype of the Leap series. It has this massive thumb, whatever. I mean, that's the size of. Now I've been accused creating Dorito chip sized picks. This is legitimately, it looks even closer. Look, it's bigger than my head. But anyway, so the story goes with the Leap was that basically at the time I had a full-time job doing user experience, that I was traveling back and forth to Washington, D.C., trying to solve my own problem and coming up with these, came up with tons and tons of sketches. You can even find on Facebook some of the old sketches and stuff that we had, outrageous concepts, just trying to, the sketches, part of the sketching process is kind of like fleshing out. You got to kind of know all the bad ideas to be able to kind of weed through and distill that into the really good ideas or things you might borrow from this and that. So this prototype is a result of lots and lots of sketches, and eventually 3D modeled something that I got to a point and said, I'd really like to know what that feels like in my hands, because there's only so much you can get from that 3D model, spinning on screen. So we got the 3D prototypes printed, and I took this with me to DC. And I'd already started a dialogue with street musicians busking in the subways and whatnot, and still have a relationship with a lot of them. But in any event, put this in their hand and said, hey, what do you think of this or whatever? And one of the musicians, one of the first experiences I had with this pick was that I'm like, hey, I got this prototype. It was right before she was going on stage for a concert, local venue.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, maybe I'll try it for one song or something like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please. I'm afraid it's going to break right in the middle of a song or something, because these, they're super durable. Yeah. So anyway, she took it up there in the beginning, and, she started tinkering with it before she got up there. And she went up there and she said, oh, I just wanted to shout out to, my friend Paul's, working on these cool prototype guitar picks or whatever. And I'm like, oh man, I didn't expect that at all. She went up there and she played the entire night with this prototype. And when she said she was going to try it for a song, and the whole time I'm thinking, please don't break. Please don't break. Yeah. And but in any event, so she got through the whole show with this, and she said, I usually have, by the end of a show, I've got, pain in my thumb right here, and I don't have it with this pick, So anyways, that was kind of like the first kind of aha moment to say, okay, even if it's not that pick, there's some problem that even a professional guitar player has that may not be the same problem I have, but there's sort of a human, a deficit in the design, to recognize that there's a human sort of, functional ergonomic thing here that needs problem that needs to be solved. Yeah. So in any event, so through that feedback from that user and several other users, that prototype kind of evolved to this, which is another 3D printed prototype, and the whole, has been introduced, and there's some, filling in here to kind of take that. Actually, this was the second one, then the whole, and then it's kind of, I don't know how well you can see that in your camera, and then that kind of evolved. You can see the kind of shape starting to kind of come together, and then eventually, we started manipulating that in 3D space, and then that became this guy. Marked that up. That became a little smaller, kind of turned into this thing, and this thing eventually turned into this thing, and this thing, so eventually came down, which is still a large, large
Yeah.
pick, but that's kind of the size difference. And that's kind of like, this came out of that. And when I got to this stage, essentially, and I was putting prototypes in people's hands, I knew it wasn't for everyone, but there was a very specific group of people that liked the way it felt. And I felt like, okay, based on what I've learned, there's some intellectual property here, possibly. But more importantly, this is like worth trying to go to market, which led to the Kickstarter, which sort of got the company off the ground. So that's kind of a little backstory there, with some picks that you probably don't have in your collection of massive picks. But
I certainly don't have your prototypes in there.
I
I do have the original Leaps. Before you started doing the Axe series, so we're coming into the present day now, what did you learn from the Leap experience? I know you're still making the Leap, but what did you take from that going into this new range? Because they're very, very different picks.
I'm actually I'm in the process of retooling and remanufacturing the Leap. I have so many users that really like this design, and I'll talk about the design in a second, and the changes between that and the Axe series. But I felt it was important to kind of keep this for now in the inventory of products, because there are so many people that have responded that really love this thing. So I don't want to mess up anything that we're doing right. But the things that we learned from, here's the lead model of the Leap series. A couple things. From a manufacturing standpoint, there's some manufacturing artifacts in this that needed to be better executed, and we're doing that in the new picks. But that aside, just in the fundamental design, you can see that that the grip, there's two things. Number one, you pretty much, it's designed to hold thumb side on one side, index finger on the other. And I have seen people hold it the other way. I prefer to hold it that way, but it wasn't designed to do that. As a matter of fact, I didn't share this with you last time, but somebody actually created a Frankenstein version of this. They actually buy more than one pick, because they
that's brutal.
And they actually did this. This is one of my best customers too, but
Wow.
and he sent me. He's trying to explain it to me, and he finally sent me a version of what he's doing. But I'm like, so the grip is, especially the curvature of the grip. There's a lot of people that really like that, but the downside is two things. Two main things is, number one, it kind of has to be held one way, right? And number two, the other main thing is that the edges of the grip extend beyond the edges of the pick. So if you're doing pick scrapes, or if you're even just strumming, especially on the rhythm, those edges can tend to nick the strings a little bit, because it's a little more cumbersome. Now, it's a trade-off. A lot of things in design are trade-offs. You're trading the very intentional grip for some performance issues. But if you're used to holding your pick and barely exposing any of the tip, this probably isn't going to be the pick for you. But if you've got a hand impairment, or you're struggling to kind of learn how to hold a pick or whatever, you're going to like the way it feels. So one of the things I learned from that is that I want to find a way to keep the integrity of the company's sort of core value proposition of creating these sort of like hand-friendly, grip-friendly picks, but try to make sure it can be played on both sides. Make sure that the user is able to do pinch harmonics or whatever, because that's a little bit more challenging with this, because you can't get right up to the tip. And so that's sort of like some of the lessons learned. It just has to do with the inherent size and the very intentional grip on that pick. We talked a little bit last time that essentially what I saw as like an overall strategy, though, was to introduce a family of picks on one end of the spectrum that was to deal with a very underserved, in my opinion, market for people that really are struggling to hang on to a pick that that want that problem solved.
Yeah.
And so I think the Leap series is definitely on one end of the spectrum. If you consider the other end of the spectrum, like a Jazz 3 or a very, smaller pick, that it couldn't be more different. The Axe series is kind of an introduction. I'm not trying to be, Dunlop Jazz 3 picks. I'm not trying to replace anything that's in the market. I'm still trying to solve the core problem of being able to hang on to a grip in a form factor that's kind of grip friendly, but allows the user to have the kind of playability that they're used to and technique and whatnot. And not only that, if we get real lucky, and I believe we did with the Axe series, there's actually a net gain in some way because you can secure the pick a little bit more. You're able to maybe pick fat. People have reported, with the battle axe that they can speed pick more efficiently, and with the Axe blade, people tell us that the pinch harmonics are easier or whatever.
The material that you've used, which I know we can't discuss because it's proprietary, but the material that you used doesn't result in any string noise. It's got no chirp, which is, for a pick that's around the 2 mil mark, I want to put across just how big a deal that is, because to get something that stiff with bevels that size and for it not to chirp is a massive deal. Was that an intentional thing when you were making it?
As much as I'd like to take credit for these like brilliant innovation, nuances or whatever, I feel like any innovation that comes out of is really a net result of the process, right? And the process is understanding, coming up with a hypothesis, coming up with a prototype, testing, validating, learning, iteratively making changes or whatever. And if you do that enough, you get enough feedback, of course you get to a certain point where it's like, okay, I'm going to wait until it's perfect, because that'll never happen, especially when it comes with guitar picks, because it's such a personal, experience.
Yeah, of course.
But I think the process sort of created these sort of net gain, innovations by trying things. Some things work, some things don't work. Well, I can't say it was completely accidental, what happened, but it's just to get what feels like, if you just compare it side by side, it's like, okay, this is an incremental improvement. But I think when you're dealing with something that's got a multi-decade legacy, like a guitar pick, being able to squeeze an incremental improvement out of it is saying a lot. It takes a lot of effort.
Now, just on the subject of the Axe series, I know that obviously people can go on and they can go to the link that will be in and around this in its various forms and find out about it on your site and whatnot. Can you very quickly go through the 3 models that are in the new series and just talk a little bit about each one?
Sure thing. So I've got I'll start with the Axe, the battle axe rather. And that's the purple one. I think that's the one you like. It's a 2 millimeter pick with sort of this continuous edge going all the way around. And that's sort of part of the magic of, we talked about injection molding a little bit. One of the big challenges is an injection molded parts is to hide the manufacturing artifacts, in a way that doesn't affect the performance. So that's one thing that was really important in this pick, was to comfort, but also to have just sort of the purity of the end product and just have it feel great in hand. So a lot of people that like this is sort of similar in size to, I think I've got a Jazz. Let's see. People always ask me this question, so now it's going to be answered. How does it compare with sort of like a Jazz? I've got a Petrucci here. The Axe blade, this was sort of the result of an aha moment that I had when I'm making all these, we're making the Leap series. It looked like this, it had 3 different, each side had 3 different, thicknesses. I'm like, well, what happened? What if this one side was thinner than the other, and we turned that into just a conventional, pick shape. So, and it's kind of hard to see here. I got probably a better video we can overlay, later, but in any event, this is also both of these tips are 2 millimeter, bevel tip, picks. And it does have a sort of edge. It's got kind of a flexible sort of tip standard tip shape for strumming and whatnot. And then the bigger brother of that is the axe cut. And because it also has this, it's going to see that light in here, but it's got this this sort of cutout here, ring-shaped cutout here, that does a couple things. Number one, it gives you something to hang on to up here if you're using the thin side for strumming. But it also increases the amount of flex. So this is a 0.6 millimeter, but it's got a pretty good amount of flex. This is the pick I use most of the time because I mostly play acoustic. Going back, let me jump back to this guy real quick. One thing that I found was interesting, other than just, we got a thinner side of this, is that the experience really changes as you sort of rotate this pick. So, this is how I hold my pick usually when I'm using this type of pick. And it just feels completely different. You're able to get a different amount of leverage and push or pull depending on how you because of that thin edge on this pick. So anyways, that's the rundown.
Picked up the guitar kind of seriously later on in life. But what were the picks that you were using prior to the whole Bog Street?
Since I knew you were going to ask that question, I tried to drag through my collection of picks. Most of them, I guess, have been decimated or lost, but like I did found this one, and I as a sidebar, a comment before I answer that, one thing I noticed in the comments and Facebook ads and everything else, that people are like, oh, I just drill a hole in mine, or I stick this on, or people explain all the goo that they put on their picks and the drilling and all the construction work that they really want to share that. And I think that that's a fairly common thing. And I always give people a thumbs up. That's cool that you do that. Great. Not everybody wants to do that, but I think it's a pretty common thing for people to solve their own problems, and not necessarily, expect, companies to do that all the time. But this is a pick that probably I used quite a bit. It's fairly large. It actually has, somebody gave me this pick that when I was learning, and it's got just sandpaper glued to it. And that kind of got the grip for me. It's about the same size or whatever. And, so that was the pick that I started using. But it just, it didn't fully do the trick, for me, obviously. And so, but there's a lot of great picks out there, just because, I'm obviously drinking the Kool-Aid on the Bog Street products. There's a lot of fantastic picks out there. Jim Dunlop makes great picks, and they're able to do it at a great price. Another comment type thing I'm always responding to is people are like, oh, I'll just buy, Tortex picks. They're a lot cheaper and blah, blah, blah. Tortex are great picks. I mean, Jim Dunlop's been around for, 5 decades. And I would imagine after 50 years, if you're, a plastics manufacturing company at your core, you should be able to manufacture a great product at a great price, and they do. So,
in terms of the engagement, there's been a lot of very grassroots approaches to you talking to people, buskers and so on, in the development of Bog Street and over the last year or so. How do you find the experience as the figurehead of Bog Street, engaging with people out there, with players and other people that are interested in the product out in the wider world?
Overall, I love it. So there's the good far outweighs the any negative. So I guess I'll talk about the negative first, right? So if you're an entrepreneur and you're putting your stuff out there, you're going to be criticized. It's just, that's the nature of human beings, even if it's actually great. That's very subjective, right? And so I recognize that, there's a couple unique things about guitar players, that I kind of probably could have figured out before I got in the industry, but now that I've been in the industry, and I've always had tons of respect for guitar players. But one reason I think that players are very sort of loyal to guitar pick brands or different brands or whatever is because they've spent hours, thousands of hours developing their skill. They've they've created music, and they've gone through good times and bad, and their equipment sort of becomes an extension of their persona in some ways. And especially if you've been using a pick ever since you were young, and you've sort of adopted that and been using it ever since, it's become kind of an extension of you, right? So I fully respect brand loyalty and whatnot. The negative things that are kind of a little, it's kind of like at the end of the day, it's like but when people say things like, this is like with the Leap series, this is a scam, or this is a gimmicky, or this is crap. They've never used the product, but it's crap. So like there's people out there that'll just are just going to say things, and or it's too expensive. And so I understand what's behind all that. But then I have to decide, how much energy do I want to put into trying to explain that, hey man, there's a human being on the other side of this that's invested their life savings, or put this at risk or whatever to try to create something new, and maybe it's not for you, but like, let's not beat people up because they're trying to sort of break new ground. I'm not trying to hoodwink anybody into trying something that's not great. I'll guarantee, I'll say it here and I say it on the website, if you don't like the product, contact me and we'll make it right. We stand behind our product. So sometimes people say something like this, oh, this looks like a Ouija board piece, or this looks like this or whatever. I'll try to find fun ways to kind of interact with them instead of just comment. But in any event, so that's in the online world, you have that. But the real sort of reason that I continue to invest, and I believe in this company, and I'm full time doing this now, and I'm putting everything I have into this company, is because I know that the people that have contacted me, that have told me that this has changed their life, even starting with the Leap series, that they basically gave up on playing guitar because they had cut off fingers in an accident, and now they couldn't hold a pick, or they didn't have strength because of arthritis, or all these or I'm a war veteran and this, that, and the other thing. And so you're changing lives, you're making a difference, and they're validating the effort and energy and time and money that you've put into this, to make it worthwhile. And those things far outweigh any sort of negative nuance or nuisance type comments and things that you have to deal with out there.
Now I'm going to move on from that into something very positive, if I may. You have been featured in Guitar World not once but twice, and for a small maker, given the amount of time that the company's been around, that's not a small thing. So I know we talked before about the effect that the first Guitar World article had on the Kickstarter, which was, I didn't know about that, and that was absolutely crazy, because I kind of came to it in the last couple of days as well. But first of all, how does it feel, given the nature of the company and what you've put in, to have been in Guitar World twice, and what's the effect that it's had on Bog Street, sort of afterwards, from the first time and the second time? Right?
When I started the Kickstarter, I contacted every guitar, publication, online blog, anybody that I thought was sort of a key player, in the space, and told them what I was doing, and created a press release, and didn't hear anything for that we ran the Kickstarter for 30 days. Our goal was $5,000, and I think on day 28 or something like that, we hit our goal, of 5,000, and which is incidentally a fraction of what I needed to make to become a goal on the entire project. But in any event, on day 28 or so, Guitar World, all of a sudden this article appeared, and it was more like, that this company claims that this is the most comfortable guitar pick you're ever going to hold, or something like that, you're ever going to use, or something like that. So it wasn't like they were saying how wonderful we are. They're basically just creating awareness to say, hey, there's this Kickstarter campaign, they're claiming this. And that basically, we went from making 5,000 on day 28 to 15,000 on, by the end of the campaign. So that sort of press effect. And it wasn't just Guitar World. You had Music Radar and Guitar.com, and pretty much all those guys covered it, if you will. So collectively, all that sort of like was a real boost. So again, it was sort of the net result of me reaching out initially, never knowing if anything was going to happen. And it kind of, the second time around, it was kind of the same thing. So I guess I got lucky, both times. The second time around, it was, it didn't have the same bump, I'll say that as it did with the Kickstarter. But we're doing a lot of, anybody that's watched this, it's on Facebook or Instagram, is probably seeing our ad more than they want to. But so I'm investing heavily in trying to create awareness for the company and whatnot, and reaching out to the guitar worlds of the world, and is one of those things. I'm actually also doing a promotion with Guitar World, several promotions with Guitar World coming up. There's going to be a segment called Cooking with Sound with one of the editors, the tech editors.
How has your outlook changed? How has Bog Street's outlook changed as a company since the beginning, now that you're a year and a bit on?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think that certainly my empathy for, as my sort of personal experience has kind of gotten more advanced, and I'm kind of unlocking more, the guitar. One of the things I love about the guitar is it's an instrument that you can pick up in a relatively short amount of time. You can get something out of it, but you realize as you sort of progress that the learning curve is kind of very, very steep to really, to be able to, to accomplish the kind of things that you see in the people playing guitar, that you're like, wow, that's awesome. You realize how far away that actually is from where you're at, and no matter how much you've advanced. So, so as I've kind of been able to increase my skills and abilities, as a player, and talk to more and more guitar players and play more, I've kind of unlocked more understanding and appreciation and empathy, which, as we talked about before, is kind of like the ultimate tool for a company to have, to basically understand the needs in the market and to be able to ideate and come up with concepts and things that can kind of meet those needs. So if anything, I wish my skills were advancing a lot faster than they are, but it definitely has helped me it's helping me, increase my empathy for the users.
What's been the sort of, and this is an ongoing process for such a relatively young company, but what's been the best part of it so far?
Definitely the early emails that I got from players that had various hand impairments and things that basically, went from not being able to play the guitar to play the guitar. It's like the ultimate validation. Even if I only got one email like that, it kind of like, it's like, wow, all this effort and investment and work that's gone into this is actually changed somebody else's life. And I think as human beings, that's kind of one of the ultimate sort of things that makes a person feel good and validated, is that they can positively impact somebody else's life. And so so that's definitely without question sort of the overwhelming net positive of all of the experiences that I get emails that are saying like, thank you for creating this, thank you for doing this. I'm like, wow, I didn't set out to do that. I set out to solve my own problem, and now I'm trying to kind of bring that to the market. It's I don't know, that's the ultimate sort of positive part of the experience, I guess.
Now, what have you just had you got a new line out. You've mentioned retooling and reappraising, if you like, the Leap. But what have you got coming up in the near future? What's on the next on the horizon?
So I have an exclusive now. This is the first time. I don't know when this video is actually going to go out, Okay. But I actually just literally got probably 30 minutes before this call. I've got the new mini beast that it's going to come out in black, but it'd probably be easier to see camera in this color here. Oops. Yeah, let's load it easier. So this is a small jazz style pick that is the same on both sides. And it's, let me put that up to the protrusion here. It's actually a little bit shorter than that. Can you see that?
Yeah. So slightly smaller than the Jazz XL.
Slightly smaller. Yeah. I mean, it's close. It's close. Again, three-sided. I think this is 1.5 millimeter here. It's got it's the same tip that's on the lead model I had here a second ago. I'll put this Frankenstein one up here. Yeah, basically that side of the lead tip is the same side that's on this one. And again, just going back to grip preferences or whatever, if you have a pinch, pad to pad pinch technique, or pretty much side or pinch, this pick's going to feel amazing. If you hold your pick like that, it might not be the pick for you. I have to figure out how to articulate that to people. But in testing, I got a lot of amazing feedback about this pick, and this pick is going to probably launch over the weekend. So that's Mini Beast. And then, so that's really, I talked about this end-to-end spectrum of the Leap series on one end of the spectrum and the Axe series on the other. This one's kind of a hybrid, of both. It's and in addition to that, we have a half dozen or so new design variations in queue that I'm working on for the Axe series. Based on people asking for thicker and thinner and this, that, and the other thing. So those are in prototyping, modeling, and testing right now.
If anybody wants to go and find out about Bog Street, where do they go on the internet?
Bogstreet.com, and we're at Bog Street, Instagram / on Facebook / Bog Street, Twitter Bog Street. So we're fairly unique, and that's where you can find us anywhere. Please follow us on Instagram, though. That's kind of usually where I end up putting the information out first.
Paul, thank you very, very much for coming back to talk to me twice. And we've done it. We've done the good work this time. So thank you very much for talking to Heavy Repping and to me.
Thank you.
All the absolute best with the new products. I think the Axe series is wicked.
Thank you, John. Good talking with you.
A
pleasure
indeed, man.
All right,
Excellent. All right, cool.
Cool, man.
So I hope you enjoyed that little chat that we had. It was incredibly informative, especially for those of you who are looking to get into the pick making game. And I hope that it's been of use to each and every one of you. If you would like any more information, please feel free to follow at Heavy Repping. You can learn more about Bog Street at bogstreet.com. And if you would like to subscribe for more videos and more podcasts, you are more than welcome to do so. You are always welcome in the Plectroverse. In the meantime, my name is John Tron Davidson. This is Heavy Repping, and I shall see you soon. So just remember, if you're not sure what to do in life, remember, rep hard and rep heavy.